We have a quorum now, so good morning. This is the meeting on Report 65 of the Audit Report, Chapter 2. Please invite our guests in. Sorry, we had a closed-door meeting just now, so it was a bit behind schedule. But anyway, good morning. This is the PAC meeting on Chapter 2 of Report number 65. On food waste, reduction and recycling of food waste. So I thank Mr. Wong, Secretary, for the Environment and other department heads. I won't go through the list one by one. In a moment, when questions are raised, you'll be invited to speak. So Mr. Wong, Secretary, will speak first, and Mr. Ying, Director of Housing, would you like to speak as well? Any other government departments would wish to speak? Well, we have a tight schedule, and we hope that the meeting can be adjourned before 1 p.m. So as to avoid another meeting as much as possible. So please do not deflect the questions. And let's not waste time. Mr. Wong, over to you, please. Chairman, the Environment Bureau and the Environmental Protection Department attach great importance to food waste management and look forward to the support and participation of the Legislative Council and the community, including government departments and public institutions, to implement the relevant initiatives effectively. We agree with the recommendations of the Audit Commission regarding the reduction and recycling of food waste. The following are my responses to major issues. Government's past efforts in the reduction of food waste. And first of all, I'd like to give a brief review on the government's past efforts in the reduction of food waste. Since 2005, the government has put forward various measures and projects on the reduction and treatment of food waste in the policy papers on waste treatment, which include A. The policy framework for the management of municipal solid waste 2005 to 2014, published in 2005, proposed to recover about 500 tons of food waste generated from commercial industrial activities through source separation of food waste for biological treatment, such as composting and anaerobic digestion. Since then, the government has implemented various pilot schemes promoting on-site food waste treatment and planned for the development of organic waste treatment facilities, OWTF Phase 1 and 2. For promoting on-site food waste treatment, the Environment Bureau and the Education Bureau jointly invited all schools in the territory to sign a Green Lunch Charter, which encouraged them to stop using disposable containers and adopt on-site meal portioning where possible to reduce food waste. The ECF, the Environment and Conservation Fund, would provide subsidies for exiting schools to install the necessary equipment, while the standard design of new schools will cater for the mode of on-site meal portioning. Moreover, there are the food waste recycling projects in housing estates, which subsidize private housing estates to source separate food waste for recycling to use for compost and at the same time educate the public to reduce food waste. As for the planning of the OWTFs, the funding for the development of OWTF Phase 1 was approved by the Electrical Finance Committee in October 2014. The contract was awarded to EPD in mid-December 2014, and the facility is anticipated to commence operation in 2017. The environmental impact assessment and engineering feasibility study of OWTF Phase 2 were completed in the end of 2013 and 2015, respectively. The tender preparation works are being conducted, and we intend to invite tender in 2016. The Environment Bureau has reported the progress of the relevant work in detail by submitting the paper, Updated Background Brief on Management of Municipal Solid Waste in Hong Kong, to the Legislative Panel on Environmental Affairs, EA Panel, in April 2009 and January 2011, as well as in the paper, Reduce, Recycle and Proper Waste Management in March 2012. In May 2013, the Environment Bureau published the Hong Kong Blueprint for Sustainable Use of Resources. Besides the various measures proposed earlier, the document also emphasizes the importance of food waste reduction, the Food-Wise Hong Kong campaign, FW campaign, and OWTFs. In February 2014, the Environment Bureau published the Food Waste and Yard Waste Plan for Hong Kong 2014-2022, the Food Waste Plan, which sets out 4 main strategies as the backbone to tackle the food waste challenge, namely reduction to source, food donation, food waste collection, and turning food waste into energy, with a target of reducing food waste disposal to landfills by 40% in 2022. Since July 2014, the ECF has been funding non-profit organizations, NGOs, in the recovery of surplus food for distribution to the needy in the community. The funded activities include collection of surplus and edible food from markets, retail shops, and food wholesalers. As of October 2015, the ECF has approved a total of 10 such projects with a funding support of about $15 million for the collection of around 950 tons of surplus food in 2 years and donation to 700,000 headcounts. The above shows that over the past decade, the government has adopted a progressive approach in implementing various measures for enhancing community mobilization and education, facilitating different sectors in practicing food waste reduction and source separation, as well as fostering behavioral changes so as to get ready for the large-scale food waste recycling activities in future. Building on the efforts made and experience gained in the past years, the current term government has further consolidated the relevant strategies and measures, with the food waste plan launched last year to provide a clear and holistic approach and strategy for its future work. Collaboration among government departments. The implementation of food waste reduction and recycling requires the concerted efforts of the C&I sector, educational bodies, relevant government departments, and the general public. The FW campaign has progressed from the initial launching stage to an expansion stage. We now focus on expanding the ongoing major projects to further encourage public and community participation in food waste reduction. The campaign will then enter a deepening stage with a view to further instilling a behavioral change, etc. We're rolling out a number of activities and initiatives, such as distributing and promoting the good practice guides to the C&I sector to reduce the generation of food waste, launching the Food Waste Charter Scheme and the Food Waste Eatery Schemes, placing APIs and advertisements, opening a Big Waste Facebook account, and landing up a Big Waste mascot to appear at major events, distributing publicity materials, organizing roving exhibitions in districts, providing food waste training workshops and talks, etc.
Different stakeholders can determine the level of participation regarding their own situation. We agree that the government departments should play a leading role by setting a good example and actively participating in the food waste campaign. Signing the Food Waste Charter is one, but not the only way for government departments to express their support. The departments can determine their actual way of participation based on their own circumstances. In fact, the Environmental Bureau, the Environmental Protection Bureau Department have maintained liaison and cooperation with relevant government departments. Through different channels, they have participated in various activities on food waste reduction and recycling, such as involving in the Foodwise Hong Kong Steering Committee to help the committee devise the good practice guides for different sectors, implementing measures on food waste reduction in departments. We will continue to encourage the relevant departments to participate in the Foodwise campaign, including signing the charter as far as practicable. Out of the 12 departments mentioned in the audit report, 10 have already signed the charter. Some departments are in the role of a venue manager rather than a food waste producer. In that case, the government will encourage these departments to implement food waste reduction by other suitable means, such as providing technical advice and other appropriate support to the tenants on food waste reduction. The ENB and EPD will continue to pursue vigorously various components of the Foodwise campaign, including inviting more bureaus, department, government-subsidized NGOs, and private organizations to sign the Foodwise Charter and promptly providing any necessary assistance to those interested in signing the Charter. It's mentioned in the audit report that the quantity of food waste disposed of increased from 1.18 million tons in 2004 to 1.33 million tons in 2013, a 13% increase. I'd like to point out that the increase comes from food waste generated by the commerce and industry sector. During this period, Hong Kong's annual GDP has increased from 1,317 billion to 2,132 billion, a 62% increase, and the annual number of visitors have increased from 22 million to 54 million, a 145% increase. These objective factors indicate that Hong Kong has experienced economic growth in this period, which to some extent resulted in an increased pressure from the food waste generated by the commerce industry sector. Now, despite the continuous increase in economic activities and number of visitors in Hong Kong, the total amount of food waste disposed in 2014, it's about 1.329 million tons, did not show further increase as compared to 2013. So over the past 2 years, there has been noticeable change in the awareness and behavior in the community. For example, the habit of taking food home after meals, or more participation of the commerce industry sector in food donation. We will keep up our efforts in promoting further reduction in food waste amongst various sectors according to strategies. Regarding the development of food waste treatment and recycling facilities, the government has adopted a multi-pronged approach with the focus on waste reduction at source. The unavoidable food waste will be recovered and recycled as far as possible. We commissioned the Kowloon Bay pilot composting plant, the pilot plant in August 2008 as the first educational and pilot project. We also utilized the capacity of the pilot plant to launch the Food Waste Recycling Partnership Scheme in collaboration with the commerce and industry sector in June 2010, under which the source-separated food waste was delivered to the pilot plant for recycling. Furthermore, we have also provided training and good food waste management guidelines for the frontline and management staff participating in the partnership scheme, so as to gain experience in source separation and collection of food waste, as well as to get fully prepared for large-scale food waste collection upon completion of the OWTF. The audit report also stated that the actual treatment quantity of the pilot plant was significantly lower than the maximum capacity of 4 tons per day of food waste from the commerce industry sector. I'd like to respond to the issues of the trial process. The pilot plant is the first set up in Kowloon Bay, and working with the commerce industry sector, we want to promote food waste reduction and source separation. The deliverables aimed at gathering experience and information on the collection and treatment of organic waste, thus facilitating future food waste recycling when the large-scale OWTS for commerce and industry sector were ready for commissioning in accordance with the plan. So, the objectives were presented to the LegCo Economic Affairs Panel on 27th of April 2009 and 29th of March 2010. As an educational and trial facility, the pilot plant was of a modest scale and adopted the aerobic composting technology that does not require complex engineering work. Furthermore, the actual quantity of source-separated food waste sent to the pilot plant from restaurants, markets, and food manufacturers fluctuates depending on the daily operations and resources for practicing source separation. The 4 ton per day of source-separated food waste figure stated in the EA panel papers referred to total capacity of organic waste, including food waste, bulking agents, bark chips and sawdust, and premature compost that the pilot plant could handle. So the addition of bulking agents and premature compost was required to achieve the composting of food waste, though the exact proportion of them to food waste was subject to trial. Now, given the focus of the pilot plant is to deal with food waste, the paper referred to food waste instead of differentiating between food waste and organic waste. The latter includes food waste, bulking agents, and premature compost. The contract between the Electrical and Mechanical Service Trading Fund and its contractor specified that the total treatment capacity of the pilot plant was 4 tons per day, including bulking agents. In retrospect, it would have been more appropriate to use the term organic waste when referring to the treatment capacity of this demonstration plant. We will strengthen our existing efforts to encourage more commerce industry establishments to participate in the partnership scheme. We are now exploring with the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department to launch a pilot scheme at FEHD's markets to conduct proactive food waste collection services, which facilitates stall owners to place source-separated food waste into designated collection bins at designated times without having to leave their stalls. We'll also reach out to more individual restaurants, hotels, and shopping malls to engage their participation and provide technical support, guidelines, and training to this commerce industry sector to facilitate their effective implementation of food waste reduction and recycling. Moreover, the construction of a private treatment facility at the Eco Park with a daily maximum capacity of 100 tons was completed. Funding for the government-built OWTF Phase 1 was approved by LegCo in October 2014. The facility with a daily maximum capacity of 200 tons of food waste is under construction and expected to commence in 2017. Phase 2, with a daily maximum capacity of 300 tons, located at Salang in North District. Its environmental impact assessment and engineering facility were completed. The tender invitation of the project will commence in mid-2016, and we will keep in view the development of various technologies, research, and consider incorporating successful experience. It's also revealed in the audit report that the government has underestimated the project costs in developing OWTF Phase 1 and should make improvement when implementing projects in the future. I wish to point out that OWTF Phase 1 was the first of its kind waste facility in Hong Kong, and there was no applicable cost reference data, which allowed us to come up with an accurate cost estimate for the project. In our briefing to the EA panel in November 2010, we already indicated in the discussion paper that the parallel tendering approach would be adopted so that the government could finalize the figures based on the tender prices received when submitting the proposal to the Public Works Subcommittee and the FC for seeking funding. So as to why there is an increase in cost estimate, we have fully explained and discussed the matter in the paper submitted to the EA panel in March 2014, as well as in the PWSC meeting in April 2014 and the FC meetings in July and October 2014. In December 2014, we successfully awarded a design, build, operate contract for OWTF Phase 1. It has provided significant cost estimate reference data for future OWTF projects to allow the government to come up with a more accurate cost estimate. As indicated in the audit report, we will take appropriate measures to ensure that significant work requirements are included in a consultancy agreement and endeavor to make a reasonable cost estimate so the government can earmark sufficient funding for the project. So in conclusion, looking ahead, we will take practical steps to expedite the implementation of the measures set out in the 2014 Food Waste Plan. The food waste facility in Siuhuwan, Langtao Island, with a maximum capacity of 200 tons per day, will be a particularly important facility for Hong Kong. The facility is scheduled for completion in 2017. In view of this, we are under intense public scrutiny, so we are liaising with the business sector, gearing up for collaboration to make good use of the food waste treatment facility in Siuhuwan. At the same time, we will continue to pursue various components of the Foodwise campaign, consolidate the experience and practices of various parties, including the Foodwise charter assignees, and share with them the experience and practices through the network of the Foodwise campaign. Chairman, the ENB and EPD welcome comments from members on the contents of the audit report and the government's work on food waste reduction. My colleagues and I are also pleased to answer questions from members to keep the committee abreast of the progress of our work. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong. I'd like to ask the Audit Commissioner, do you need to respond to some comments that are not made in the report? And then we can enter Q&A. Do you need to supplement? Well, at the current stage, we have no intention to respond. Mr. Leung Kai-jung is responsible for Chapter 2. You have 20 minutes. And then Chan Ha-kan, Wong Yuk-man. Well, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for, so I have to thank the Secretary for such a long opening speech. Now, taking a macro perspective, in report number 65, there's some basic information that I'd like to direct members to. For example, paragraph 1.5 says that every person in Hong Kong, the domestic waste, we are more than Taiwan by some 80%. Well, Secretary, you also referred to different measures and plans in reducing food waste. Well, there are also different observations. Well, my first observation regarding these plans, well, there's a lack of information. Before you implement these plans and after you implement these plans, so the production of food waste, how much has it reduced? It is very lacking. This information is very lacking. That's the first point. Second point, in the audit report, in part 3, it talks about the reusing of food waste. This facility, we see that it's behind schedule, it's over budget, but there is a fundamental issue that I'd like members to take note of. So, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 capacity. So where is this food waste coming from? Even though you have a capacity, this is something I want everybody to take note of. In my macro observations, I'd like to refer you to page 6, figure 2. Secretary, I need to point out that This figure, it's a color picture. It's very beautiful. It illustrates pictorially that the food waste, how food waste will be dealt with from 2011 to 2022. But in fact, when I look at this plan, you've only transferred some problems. You've taken food waste from landfills to the OWTF. You have not reduced the food waste. You're just transferring it from landfills in phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, in the interim, you have the Foodwise campaign. You have levy schemes, and you might feel that food waste might be reduced. But I need to point out to the Secretary, do you agree that the plan in 2014, you have only transferred the problem? You have not reduced food waste, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for the question. Well, I'd like to respond to a few questions. Well, every year we have figures for overall number of wastes. We break it down. For example, total figure for food waste, how much coming from commerce industry, how much is from domestic sources. So we have suitable data, and as I said in the opening, in the past decade, the overall amount and recently the total amount of food waste in 2014, we see a change. So we see that in recent figures for 2014, the total amount of food waste in Hong Kong has not increased. It has in fact come down compared to the last year. So if Mr. Leung says there are insufficient data, I'd like you to point out where is the information lacking. And we have a timetable for our latest campaign. I agree, in phase 1 it is delayed. That's because there has been more discussion in LegCo. The tender schedule was also slightly delayed. Now, regarding the source, we have a very clear description. In the first organic waste treatment facility, the food waste would come from commerce and industry, because the blueprint stated that the food waste is concentrated in those areas. So under different considerations, that would be the source. And in the future facilities, we could expand to cover domestic sources. So we do have a description. Regarding, we had illustrated that there are 4 lines of thinking. That is, we need to reduce food waste at source. So we have the Foodwise campaign in Hong Kong, where we mobilize the Hong Kong public, whether it is domestic or in commerce and industry, they need to reduce food waste. So that has been the focus on reducing food waste. At the same time, Hong Kong and other cities need a multi-pronged approach. So aside from reduction at source, we also need to convert waste into energy. It can become compost or energy. So there are many approaches. So it's not saying that we're transferring it from a landfill. Well, even the transfer from landfill, it's positive. We require this handling because there are constraints in Hong Kong, so conversion into energy is one method. We need reduction at source, the Foodwise campaign, we see the domestic sources, and this campaign is expanding its scope step by step, and by building these facilities, when source cannot be Deuce, we can still handle it.
Do you wish to supplement? Of course, you can have some statistics regarding the aggregate amount of food waste produced in Hong Kong, how much waste is generated and how much of that is food waste. But you refer to the Foodwise campaign and the Foodwise charter, but I don't think that you have been able to give us an accurate picture. For example, you've spent so much on each of the campaign, but you've not been able to tell us by how much you've reduced the food waste. That is the statistics that I was asking for. And secondly, the Secretary in his speech said that our GDP has gone up while the volume of food waste has stayed stable. I would have some doubts about that. While there are many reasons why our GDP may go up, but there may not be a direct correlation between that and the volume of food waste. Say, for example, this year, my company had participated in 3 more meals. Does that mean that more food waste is generated? So you shouldn't say that because of that we have exercised good control on food waste. So, Chairman, I'm now going to ask Kenneth. Would you like him to answer your earlier question before you proceed? So 2 questions. First of all, how do you assess whether or not you've achieved your targets? And you've also heard the second question. To answer the first question, my colleague Mr. Oi Kwong could perhaps supplement. When we launched the Foodwise campaign, we did it in several stages. First of all, we need to mobilize the public, and then we need to intensify the campaign. We've just started a survey, and we've used scientific and objective methods to assess what the effectiveness of the Foodwise campaign. The impact, of course, is territory-wide, covering households and starting from households. So I think our colleagues can elaborate on that. I agree with Mr. Leung that we need more information to assess the effectiveness of our campaign, but we need to wait until we reach a certain stage before we'll do that. Well, I think you would need to have an estimate when you apply for funding to LegCo. It's not the case that you can only wait until you've finished the campaign before you can make that assessment. For the Foodwise campaign, we have a target that is within the next few years. We want to reduce, food waste at source by a certain percentage. We certainly have such statistics that we can provide later. According to the report, the EDP already had a blueprint, but it appeared that you've never, achieved the target. Now that you've given us a detailed explanation, we would like to know at what stage have you achieved, how much of your deliverables and so on. Well, I think you've been, beating around the bush, but I think you need to tell us, the kind of milestones that you have achieved. I think the campaign has been launched for about 5 years. My colleague will explain the targets that we set at the beginning and the progress that we have made according to our assessment. Secondly, now how do we interpret the increase in the volume of food waste in Hong Kong, starting from 2003-2004, the total volume of food waste, I think it's gone up by 13% during that period, compared with other changes, such as changes to our GDP. It was up 62%. Of course, there may not be a direct correlation between the two. We've also pointed out that the number of visitors to Hong Kong has gone up by more than 100% during the same period. It was up 145%. Number of tourists, I think we all understand that to some extent that would have an impact. Chairman, do we also need to deduct the number of people from visiting other countries? simple statistics. Also, population growth would have an impact on the volume of food waste generated. Over those years, we've seen a rising trend, but the aggregate we have observed recently is going down. It's not going up any further. So that is a good indication. If you want to use GDP as a yardstick, I think if you've done a good job in terms of public education, I don't think GDP should be a factor. But over the years, you've not achieved your target in terms of public education. And you're now using the GDP figure. You look at GDP, the GDP has been steadily going up over the last few years. I mean, they also, publish a blueprint. So you need to explain in this manner. I think what you tell this committee should be based on evidence. You can't just say something and expect us to believe it. All right, Secretary? Chairman. Regarding the method of assessment, we have collected information from different sources to evaluate the effectiveness of the scheme. Like the Secretary said, we look at the total volume of food waste dumped at landfills. We've also collected information from different trades and industries and the participants. And then we would summarize the figures. We look at the code of good practice, and we've also published articles and 16 cases on the website. We've published 6 codes of best practices. Thirdly, we've started a baseline survey, targeting the catering industry regarding their efforts in reducing the production of food waste. There are 3 aspects. First of all, the benchmark survey that was completed in 2014, and the survey covered more than 1,100 restaurants. The intermediate survey is now going on in 2015. The final survey will be done in 2016. The 3 surveys will help us assess the impact of this campaign on the catering industry. We will not only collect the figures, we will also find out by how much we've enhanced their awareness to reduce food waste and so on, and progress has been satisfactory. We will continue to monitor with the different industries and evaluate the progress. Could you give us the direct information? Secretary, anything else from you? Thank you. I've heard about many of your measures, but I would like to ask a more specific question. Talking about the Food-Wise campaign, if we go to page 2 of the audit report. I'm looking at table 1, Chairman. There is an indicator here for the Food-Wise campaign. It is your target to reduce the total volume of food waste produced daily to 360 tons per day. And you've only implemented the Food-Wise campaign for 2 years. Now, do you have any figure or quantity you can give us? That is 2 years down the road, by how much have you reduced the volume of food waste produced? If you don't have such figures, then in future, can you come up with a more credible method to work that out? If you don't have a figure for us now, you say there have been many cases, many restaurants have signed on and they've reduced the production of food waste, but I'm not seeing any figures. So it's very difficult for you to convince us that your campaign is a success. As I said, we had a survey, we have a baseline survey, an intermediate study, and a final study, which would look at the effectiveness of the Food-Wise campaign we carried out in the last 2 or 3 years. The number of cases we've looked at, while we don't have comprehensive information, but these organizations are now steadily launching out their food waste campaigns. Some organizations have told us that after they've adopted measures to reduce food waste, they had achieved, they have reduced food waste by 10-20%. And details regarding such cases have been put onto our website. We've also put it on Facebook, and we also have incorporated that into our code of practice and share them with the trade. My question is how you quantify that. You told us there have been 100 or a dozen or so cases, but you have to know, of the 360 tons for year 1 and year 2, you've reduced food waste by 100 tons per day. So have you done any statistical extrapolation? That's the answer I was looking for. I asked you what method did you use to measure the figure and tell us whether you've achieved your target. I think this is what the director of Audit want to know, because we've spent the money on the FoodWise campaign. If one looks at the reference material in the FoodWise campaign, the 5 to 20% is the expected outcome, and that would be in respect of the amount of food waste dumped at landfills. And we will closely monitor the figures. So you're now shifting the focus now. You say the amount of food waste which have gone to the landfills. So you have no way to measure the effectiveness of your campaign. You say the volume of food waste dumped at landfills has been reduced, but you don't know the reason. You don't have any reason to account for that. Okay, I will not pursue this any further. For the time being, it is my observation that you simply have no way to make the measurement. Well, perhaps they have a way. Why don't you let them answer the question? So do you have any means to make such measurements? Mr. Au, I think we need to rely on different channels. The survey on landfills dumped at landfills, and also based on the performance of the catering industry, we found that based on the individual cases, we would assess the effectiveness of the campaign. Could you give us some information so that we can help you make that assessment? Can you provide such information for us? Secretary. Well, I think my colleague is saying that on the one hand, we're talking about the volume of food waste dumped at landfills and how that figure has changed. And I think there are clear records for that, because all the tipping trucks will be recorded, when they go to the landfills. And secondly, we also have conducted a survey. That is, we look at our stakeholders from the commerce and industry sector. We want to look at those cases of those who have successfully reduced the production of food waste. So we are obtaining data from both sources to find out about the progress we've achieved in respect of this campaign. Could you give us such data then, Chairman? The total volume dumped at landfills, I think I already, covered that earlier. Recently, the food waste dumped at landfills has started to decline rather than, continuing to go up. And secondly, for those restaurants participating in the FoodWise campaign, we are conducting a survey, and we've already obtained some preliminary figures. Next year, there will be more detailed figures. Later on, with such statistics will be available. So you will be giving us the findings of your survey. Is that right? Well, we need to write our report. Mr. Chen has asked this question. We're grateful to you for giving us an explanation from the macro perspective. But we need to write our report. We need specific statistics to put into our report. Chairman, we can certainly, supply those statistics. Some of those are already available. Some are being compiled at the moment. Secretary, well, Mr. Chen has asked his question. I need to give you an opportunity to answer the question and record that into our report as well. Kenneth, if you will give me a few more minutes, we were talking about the survey, such as questionnaire surveys. They may arrive at some statistics. They may then extrapolate based on such figures. I don't know. But I would like to now go to a different area. That is the Foodwise campaign at schools. Well, this is actually the container my son uses to take his lunch at school. Now, if we can go to table 5, table 5 is about a survey you did in 2008 and 2010 among schools, and in your survey you try to find out, how students, carry their lunch at school, whether they would patronize lunch from the suppliers, and there's also some information regarding food waste. But if you look at B and C, the recovery rate is so low. TSA has to be done by every school. Why is it that you cannot require all the schools to return such statistics to you? The overall assessment of schools, I think, should be incorporated as part of the TSA. Why is it that the figures are so small? I think this is civic education for the students. It is also meaningful for the whole community. Why is it that the schools are not providing you with the information? Deputy Secretary Mr. Yeung, perhaps you can answer the question. Thank you. Amongst these surveys, from time to time we will assist the EPD to conduct such surveys. Other than the response rate, of course, the Education Bureau can continue to encourage the schools to cooperate. Another thing we can do to help the schools is that if one looks at para 2.7, that is how much kitchen waste is produced at schools, how do we assess that? We have to teach the school, help the school learn how to take such measurements. We need to educate the schools to help them, make such measurements so that they will be able to really, know how to answer the questions in the questionnaires. So this time we will tell the schools that they should try their best to, supply the information. So that going forward, we will be able to help the EPD to do a better job in analyzing the such figures. Well, the EPD has come up with a method, but you're responsible for supervising the schools. I think both parties have the responsibility. The design of the questionnaire and the information that is sought is the duty of the EPD, but we also have our own part. We would work with the EPD together and to obtain information from the schools. Chairman, Mr. Leung referred to Table 5. Table 5 is about 2 surveys conducted in 2008 and 2010. And the response rate in 2010 was higher, but still it was not very satisfactory. As Mr. Yeung said, we want to conduct a follow-up survey. We hope to work with the Education Bureau to encourage schools to provide us with the relevant information. This is something that we will follow up upon. Mr. Yeung.
So in relation to school surveys or environmental initiatives, would you consider factoring them in into the assessment of the schools' ratings and ultimately the banding of schools? This is an educational issue. Well, we have been discussing much the rating of schools and assessment of schools And we need to consider very carefully whether there would be irregularities if this is included in the assessment. But we've been working very seriously with the Environment Bureau, and as far as school principals are concerned, they are very supportive of the EPD's initiatives. So I think we need time for better implementation of these initiatives in schools, because the problem doesn't just lie with the Environment Bureau or schools. We have other government officials here, and they are all involved in this. So I just want to cite this example to suggest that this is not only the responsibility of the ENB, but also other government departments, because this is the government policy with objectives to implement. Kenneth. Chairman, I find some dirt on the table, or under the table. It is true, but will please move to another seat. Is it food waste? No, Chairman. I can tell you that this is feces. Really? I don't know why. This has happened to this seat. I'm sorry, there's some problem with the seating in this room. Well, please follow this up with the Commission. Yes, we have the two committees under the CMI. Yes, move to another seat. Scary Chen. Sorry, Chairman, I haven't finished my question. Feces. Chairman, I really want to lodge a complaint. Right, accepted. This, I refer this to the Chairman of the Electoral Commission. Next question. If you look at D, there are different ways of taking lunch by students. However, schools or the Environment Bureau did not address the fundamental issue. That is, if students carry their own meal boxes to school, such as this one that I have, you can save a lot of resources, like plastic cutleries and containers. Parents would know for sure the quantity of food that students prefer, or the food that students prefer. However, the Education Bureau has not done anything to publicize the benefits of bringing your own lunch. Has anything of this sort been done? Director or PS? Well, we conducted the survey to understand better the ways of students taking lunch at school. So for D1 and 4 in Table 5, this shows the usual ways of students taking lunch at schools, and some students would have lunch outside school, and for those taking lunch at school, D shows the percentage of different ways of taking lunch at school. And over the past few years, we have been advocating the arrangement of on-site meal portioning, because on the one hand, we can save the use of disposable containers, and we will be able to better grasp the quantity of food to be distributed to students so as to save or reduce food waste. And with the support of the ECF, we help schools retrofit their facilities with the necessary equipment, and we've also accepted the recommendation from the Education Bureau, that is to adopt the new standards for new schools to provide on-site meal portioning facilities. As for publicity, encouraging parents to help students bring their own lunch to school, not all parents can make this arrangement. So for the 4 points under D is actually the reality, and we will work with the Education Bureau so that more parents would support the idea of on-site meal portioning. Because, first of all, not all parents can arrange for a lunchbox for students to bring to school in the morning. And secondly, we need to respect the views of parents. So we are not making this mandatory, but we will follow up with the Education Bureau on enhancing education and publicity. I think this is important because not many families provide this environment for students to bring their own lunch to school. Not all students are fortunate, so it's important to allow students to have a choice. Yes, Kenneth Lang. Chairman, another question. Just now, Ms. Anissa Wong mentioned that for new schools, on-site meal portioning equipment should be provided. However, in Para 2.8, even for schools with the equipment or facilities installed, they had not implemented the arrangement. And according to the paragraph, between 2007 and 2011, 6 schools have been installed with on-site meal portioning facilities. However, 4 of the 6 schools had not adopted on-site meal portioning. I think the Education Bureau should answer this question. Why is it that these schools were not using the facilities installed? Mr. Yang and the Secretary. This is true. For new schools, we'll try to provide more new facilities. As to eventually how these schools use these facilities, such as the music room, etc., this is up to the decision of schools. Now, after the release of this audit report, we believe that in relation to this facility, the Education Bureau should push harder. So we have accepted the audit's recommendation, and we have liaised with these schools to follow up on the issue. In fact, very soon, in 2015-16, within this academic year, one of the schools have implemented on-site meal portioning. As for the other school, they do not have on-site meal portioning at a centralized location, but in individual classrooms, because students will be taking lunch in classrooms, and the same objective can still be achieved. As for the remaining 2 schools, they have explained to us the operational difficulties. We may need to discuss with schools together with the EPD how to implement the arrangement. In terms of design for new schools, we'll consider whether we should pay attention to any other factors affecting the on-site meal portioning arrangement. Now, this has been identified by the audit, and we should follow up on the matter. Mr. Gary Chan. I'll take a break, Kenneth. Chairman, according to the report, we have about food waste equivalent to 250 double-decker buses disposed at landfills, accounting for 38% of total disposal at landfills. Although, despite the government's effort, only 20% of food waste is recycled. And I have this feeling after reading this paragraph. After implementing the initiatives on reducing food waste, I think there is a lack of coordination among government departments. Now, this can be reflected in the initiative of reducing food waste in housing estates. Ultimately, not many housing estates participated in the project. And on waste management, basically the Environment Bureau and the EPD did nothing but guesswork in terms of the quantity of food waste reduced? Well, I will elucidate this in a moment. As for inflating figures in terms of the 4 tons of waste handled or processed in the Kowloon Bay pilot composting plant, the actual capacity should be 13 or so tons per day. Well, I have 2 observations. Please allow the Secretary to respond to your 2 observations first. Perhaps after Secretary has responded, I will invite Mr. Ying to respond to your point about the project and housing estates. Secretary, on reduction in food waste, we need the concerted effort of government departments, various sectors of the community, and the public. Of course, we're positive about enhancing coordination among government departments. Now, for Food-Wise Charter, for example, 10 out of the 12 government departments invited have signed the charter. So we see cooperation among the government departments, but of course this can be improved. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, for the pilot plant in Kowloon Bay is for demonstration, educational purpose. And we mustn't interpret the statistics in an exaggerative manner. As for disposal at landfills, it's a quantifiable, measurable set of data. So it's not the case that we are inflating the figures. Chairman, I want to interject. The Secretary said many times that the quantity disposed at landfills is measurable. Now, I want to know, for food waste disposed of at landfills, are they mixed with other MSWs or are they disposed of separately? Now, previously, we arranged for different members of this council to go on visits to our waste disposal facilities so that they know about our basis for analyzing the mix and the quantities of waste disposed at these facilities. And this is a method accepted and recognized by the sector. We take an objective approach in measuring and analyzing the waste and the types of waste disposed of at landfills. Secretary, the member asking the question just now was chairman of the EA panel, so he knows what he's asking. So please answer his question. You should answer his question. Don't just tell us that you have took us on visits. So could you please ask your question again? Why they are inflating the figures? And on disposal at landfills, well, please answer his question because he asked a very specific question. Chairman, at present, for MSW disposed of at landfills, the waste comes to mix, and we, as said just now, invited members of the EA panel to visit the landfill to understand the survey on MSW. This is an annual survey done seriously. We conducted it once a year, and we invite Mr. Chan asked a very specific question. Well, Gary, why don't you ask your question once again on waste disposal? Please don't beat about the bush, because if you beat about the bush, we will have more follow-up questions. We have a tight schedule, so please answer directly. I asked the question because Secretary mentioned many times that disposal of food waste at landfills has reduced. But according to my observation, domestic waste, commercial waste, and food waste, they're all dumped at the landfill in a mix. So in what way can you measure such reduction in food waste disposed of at the landfill? So Mr. Chen, please answer first of all whether the waste is dumped in a mixed manner. Well, we take random sampling in our survey. We check each container or each bin to look at the mix of waste in it, including food waste, and we then come up with the estimates. So this is done annually, and there is a scientific basis in making year-on-year comparisons. So what is the sampling size? Chairman, I can provide the specific details on statistical surveys after the meeting. Gary. Oh no, Director, you'd also like to respond? Any follow-up question on this? No, not on landfills for the time being. Director of Housing. The Housing Department and the Housing Authority have done a lot in reducing MSW of food waste on both reducing at source and recycling. Over the past 2 years, we implemented pilot schemes on recycling food waste in various housing estates. We tried different methods, some on-site, some off-site. And according to the Waste Plan 2014 of the EDP, there are prerequisites for recovery of domestic waste before it can be implemented on a large-scale basis, including the large-scale processing. And in the 3.56 of the report, the EDP's director also cited the same analysis. And at present, for what can be implemented in housing estates, the purpose of these pilot schemes is to enhance awareness of residents in recycling food waste, and that is why we have implemented these schemes for the past 2 or 3 years. And as the established practice, we conducted evaluation after the implementation, and as set out in 3.48, the EPD also helped us in analyzing the data and learning from the experience. We'll focus on waste reduction, including reduction of food waste, and we have set out initiatives for reducing waste, including food waste. We conduct annual reviews on these initiatives, and in the future we're going to work with the EPD to recover and recycle food waste. Thank you, Gary. Perhaps I'll invite other government departments to respond as well, and I'll give you more time since you've asked the first question. The hospital authority, Dr. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, Kenneth. Now I'm inviting government departments to respond to the question, so you can follow up on this later. Dr. Leung, in 2013, in May, we signed the Foodwise Charter launched by the EPD, and the management of the HA is responsible for implementing the requirements in the Charter. According to our survey in 2015-16, the amount dropped by 13% comparing to 2012-13, and you can look at the comparison in terms of food waste.
Some hospitals perform better, and those who did well, they will share within the HA. So the problem we identified was that in standby meals, that is meals in the patient room, So when the patient arrives, they might not have a meal, and so we might have some extra meals. So when they don't need the meal, it would become food waste. We also have a computer system to deal with the meal demand, and so before meals are served, if the meals are confirmed at a later date, they can reduce food waste. But sometimes it might be 1 or 2 hours early, and then the patient says they don't need a meal, so it would be hard to reduce that. So we want to shorten the time, and in the previous audit report we had identified Kowloon Hospital, Grantham Hospital, where they were 0.58 and 0.46, and they are now at 0.33 and 0.35. So we want to continue, and we hope that these methods can further reduce our food waste. And I think transparency is also important, so we will disclose the hospital food waste figures, so it would serve to encourage, and that would conclude my report. We're asking you to follow up, but we don't want to affect patient care quality. We also understand that the hospitals have the hospital care standards, so yes, we will do our best. CSD, Correctional Services. Well, I'd like to say that CSD has always sought to protect the environment. I agree with the recommendations of the Audit Commission and will follow up accordingly. Regarding environmental protection, the CSD has already took the initiative to, in 2012, we had deployed, in April 2013, we had, in our CSD facilities, we had deployed a FoodWise campaign. That was 1 month before the FoodWise campaign, and we had found where there was a lot of food waste in Tai Lam Correctional Facility and so on. So we implemented the campaign there. We, in 2013, Lo Wu Correctional Facility also joined the campaign, and Stanley and Lo Wu had also joined the program. In October 2015, we had signed the FoodWise Charter, so we'll comply with the EPD and manage our food waste. I'd also like to take the opportunity to refer to page 79 in Annex D. We have 59 correction facilities. It lists the average food waste per head. So if you look at the correction facilities, so for each prisoner, the food waste per person is only 110 grams. In Thailand Female Correction Facility, we had joined the campaign, so the average, why is it 1 kilo? I'd like to report to you that Thailand Female is just a holding cell. It's not a prison facility, so they might not psychologically be prepared, and we also have a lot of human traffic, so it does present a challenge to food waste. You also need to understand one of the basic human rights are access to food. So according to human rights and legal requirements, we need to provide nutritious and food, and we also need to be in line with a global practice. So we will not reduce meals just to comply with the FoodWise campaign. Given the human rights of access to food, we will see how we can encourage participation in the FoodWise campaign. So I need to emphasize that in handling inmates. We need to be fair, and we need to be cautious. We need to strike a balance. For example, we have to look at manpower levels, stability, the anticipated number of participants, and we need to provide feasible, practical measures. Well, that's a waste of time. You should just give us the paper. Well, if every department is going to report like that, that will conclude my report, Chairman. Thank you for explaining your human-based program. We accept that. Mr. Well, we just took the opportunity to hear from all the departments. So Chairman, I would like an extra 10 minutes. Well, without doubt, the Secretary has done a lot of work regarding food reduction. I've attended 3 or 4 activities. I'm always meeting the mascot, the big waster. We see that they're doing a lot of work, but we'd like to know that on top of what they've done, how much have they spent? In Chapter 2 on page 15 of the report, it says that the government, in order to promote the campaign, well, they have the Big Waster campaign. They have a Facebook account. They have, and I've seen the website. It has about 25,000 likes on its Facebook page, and on average each month they would place a post on, and sometimes there would be more than 500 likes, but the majority in the cases it's between 100 and 300 likes, and sometimes it's less than 100 likes. We understand that these posts are announcements to reduce food waste. So since the campaign was launched on May 2013, so how much money have you spent on the Big Waster campaign? The design, the website management, and its day-to-day maintenance. How much money have you spent? Mr. Chan? The annual budget, we have responded. So starting since the FoodWise campaign started, then in announcements that would include e-platform, pamphlets, commercials, plus all announcement work. Between 2013 and 14, the expenditure was 10 million. In 2014, it was 3.1 million. Regarding website and forum, the ambassador program, liaison with the industries, education. Between 2013 and 14, the expenditure was 500,000. In 2014-15, the expenditure was 1.1 million. Now, for public campaigns, opening speeches, annual events, holiday meetings, liaison with the district councils, and so on. Between 2013 and 14, the expenditure was 2.4 million. In 2014, it was 3.1 million. Well, could you pause? We need to vote in PWSC. So let's take a 5-minute break.